Hello, I am Basil Butcher. I'm a neuroathletic coach, and I work with athletes, helping them to go from injury back to the playing field, while also working with them to enhance their performance in whichever sport they play. Today, I'm going to be doing a short presentation about a conditioning approach for the cricket athlete. And we'll be doing so using the tools of applied neurology and movement conditioning. So you're going to hear some concepts today that you usually don't hear in the strength and conditioning community. So let's get started. The characteristics of the cricket athlete or any athlete that needs to be trained from a strength and conditioning perspective are the following: strength, suppleness, stamina, speed, and spirit. And we're going to be looking at all of these. We're going to be looking at stamina and spirit as one, and that will be discussed later. So let's start. What is strength training is ability to apply explosive force in varying batting postures, apply explosive force in bowling action, maintain and generate explosive force in and out of fielding postures, sprinting strength, or the strength required to sprint, and similarly, the strength required to throw hard and accurate repeatedly. So those are the aspects of strength training for cricketers. Strength training from a batting perspective, and what we would say, strength training, batting postures. Targeted CNS activation and inhibition, external and internal focus explorations. Firstly, CNS, for those who don't know, stands for central nervous system. And this activation inhibition of the central nervous system is something that happens all the time in movement. So what we're going to be using is external and internal focus explorations to train that skill, enhance that skill. So, for example, if you're doing say a range of motion or a mobility drill, and I want you to move a joint through a specific range or enhance that range, I would say, okay, go ahead. Let's see how far you can move that joint. So here, that's where you're going to be thinking more internally, the muscles, how far can I get this joint to move? Now I'll take you out of your body and place a target, or have you look at a target, and you have to move that limb towards that target. So now the range of motion, getting you to get to that range of motion, I'm using an external focus for you to get there and taking you outside of your body. So that's what that concept means. And that's an example. So there are three postures that we train for movement that happens in life and movement: voluntary posture, anticipatory posture, and reactive posture. Voluntary posture, that's the posture that we engage in when we are gonna make a deliberate, conscious movement. Anticipatory posture, that's the movement that we would make in anticipation of some kind of movement that we are engaging in, right? So and then reactive posture, that is involuntary. That's not conscious, that's reflexive. So here are some ideas for voluntary postural training in terms of strength training, using the multi-directional lunges, because you know the batting is a bunch of multi-directional lunges. Squats, you get in and out of some batting stances to play certain strokes in varying degrees of squats. And in those two exercises, as an example, we'll use isometrics because we want to develop that strength to stay in those positions over long periods, right? And also do it in slow to sport speed. so that you have the ability to move at high rates without falling over and maintaining your posture. And why we do it slow is because when you do a movement slow, those things that you may skip over in the movement are highlighted. So you're able now to develop the skill, the strength through the entire range. Every part of that range will be developed. As we say, from a neuro perspective, the movement map of those specific movements, that map would be clear. So the brain would be getting good information. And you also would add different foot positions, as you know, playing different strokes, different shots in. As a batter, your foot goes into varying positions. We use other tools like ACMs, which stands for Assisted Contractile Mapping. That is the ability to be able to contract a muscle fully from attachment to attachment, putting tension throughout the entire muscle. That's a skill in itself. Just learning and being able to develop that skill alone will get you stronger, right? I will use long hole isometrics and things like overcoming, yielding isometrics or eccentric movements, eccentric, yielding eccentrics, overcoming eccentrics for the ACMs. We'll also use them with banded reflexive stabilization. So that means you're doing the ACM for a muscle on one side of the body, while the other side you have a band that is pulling to, so therefore you have to, you're engaged in reflexive stability on the opposite side of the body, which happens in real life, right? When you move one side of the body, the other side of the body is stabilizing you without you thinking about it. And then loaded dynamic joint stabilization with bands. So this is where you're actually moving all the various joints loaded with a band. So therefore you're developing strength through the entire range of motion of the joints. Anticipatory posture training. We'll use tools like sports speed of shoulder and hip movements with lasers. If you have lasers, that's great. You attach a laser to the arm, or you attach a laser to your midline, right? So you're wearing that laser here, so it's pointing at something, and every time you move your shoulder and arm, you want to make sure that laser stays as still as possible on the target, right? So therefore, you're enhancing that ability when you move to stay in a stable position and not falling over. Maximum reaching targets. That's another aspect of reaching that will develop that posture and enhance it. And as you know, with batting, there is a lot of reaching, and you don't want to be falling over when you're reaching to play a stroke. Medicine ball, throw, and catch. That's another tool we can use for that, as well as plyo steps. Plyo steps, that's a step that all athletes do when they go from a standing athletic position to move forward, sideways, or back, or either way, forward or laterally. That's the first step that they do. So you want to master that, and that helps in developing anticipatory posture. Now, to reactive posture training, we'll use tools like foam pad balancing, as you're standing on one leg, balancing and into doing different actions with the non-stance leg or arms or reaching and so on. Altered vision balancing. So now this is where you're taking away vision out of the balancing equation, since vision is the area that gives the most information to the brain as to where we are in space. You alter that, so now you're you're heightening up the other aspects of balance, like your vestibular system and your proprioceptive system, to work harder. So you're enhancing your whole balancing system in doing so. And muscle vibration training. That's something that we use, where we would use a massager or something of the sort on the lower legs while the person's eyes are closed. And so they'll have to make up for the loss of balance at their lower legs to other parts of their body. Now, this is strength training for bowling postures. Again, you see there the targeted CNS activation inhibition and external and internal focus explorations, and the 3 postures that we just discussed. But what's interesting here, I just added some ideas that are more specific to bowling, such as for the voluntary posture training, overhead unilateral movements, overhead pulls, horizontal pushes and pulls, wood chops, horizontal, diagonal patterns. And in all of these, we would use the isometrics of yielding, overcoming, long hold, slow to sports speed in the movements. And the other tool here I mentioned here is loaded retro walking. And for those that don't know what retro walking is, that's simply walking backwards. And just for a note, retro walking is a tool we use in rehabbing knees. And so if we can use it for rehabbing knees, why not use it for injury prevention as well as enhancing performance? I added some other tools there for anticipatory posture training, banded 4-way reaching and perturbation with relaxation. Banded 4-way reaching, so now you're reaching and you have a band attached. So we're adding some load to that reaching. And why that would be great for the bowlers is because now in the overhead action, you're loading up the overhead actions, which is applicable to bowling. And perturbation with relaxation. So you want to be able to go from doing a movement, exploding and then relaxing, exploding and relaxing. Or as you're moving, you're constantly exploding, relaxing, exploding, relaxing. That constant balance that goes on in athletic movement. So that's what we'll use tools to train that skill. And again, the reactive posture training, similar tools that we just mentioned earlier for the batting postures. Now, strength training for fielding postures. And as you notice, again, same approach. And I've added some other tools, ideas for voluntary posture training, which one is called a waiter's lunge with a rotation. That exercise is you're in a position similar to that of a standing or a dynamic athletic stance, and to move off from that stance. So you're training some of those same skills with this exercise. And same things we would do with the anticipatory posture training as we did for the batters and the bowlers. And same thing with reactive posture training. Those same skills are trained here are using these tools. Now let's move on to speed training. And let me just say this about speed training. Speed, the first thing a person would think with speed, they would just think about how fast you can move from point A to point B. That's one aspect. But in the context also of cricket, say we're also going to be adding the concept of seeing earlier and reacting faster, right? So to train the vision to do so, these are some of the tools that we would use. Acuity accommodation drills, that's one aspect of, these are two aspects of vision. Acuity being able to see something clearly. If you don't see your target clearly, you're gonna have problems. Vergence and stereopsis. Vergence is also using both eyes to sharply converge or diverge on your target. You know, so something coming close to you and something that's moving away from you. You want to be able to see them clearly, right? So those are skills being trained there. Visual perception drills, that's seeing what's around you while you're focused on something. So your peripheral vision and all those various things, and being able to perceive something, like how fast something is coming at you, so you can set yourself up accordingly, right? So you'll see how that would transfer to both batting, fielding, right? Quiet eye training. This is a relatively new concept in sports conditioning, where you're training the athlete to pay attention at certain points in their skill execution for around 100 milliseconds at a time. So therefore, they're able to see all the various cues a lot quicker and be able to respond faster, right? And you see how this could be applied in cricket to a batter, to fielding. Vestibular training. Vestibular training is also, for the layman, is also balance training. And these drills that are noted up here, they're all training, and vestibular balance is primarily reflexive. So these are reflexes that we're training. These are the different names of them. VOR, vestibular ocular reflex, vestibular ocular reflex cancellation. That's what VORC stands for. And posture, voluntary posture training for speed training. These are some of the tools we would use. Loaded dynamic joint mobility training for sports. Mobility training for sports. Throwing primitives, right? Those are getting into the positions that, and loading those positions that you would do when you're throwing an object in sport. So you want to have that mobility and strength through the entire posture of throwing an implement, in our case, a cricket ball. So you want to be able to get into that position and throw hard and accurate over and over. And what is interesting, that throwing primitive also is very similar to the bowling primitive with a slight adjustment. So for bowlers, you would use the basic tool, but you would just adjust the arm in a way that you can train it as it relates to bowling. Speed drills would be used, sprint prep conditioning drills, acceleration, deceleration drills, cutting drills, change of direction drills, stand drills. Stand drills means that's where you go from the athletic, those are the athletic stance, both dynamic and stationary. And start drills, those are the drills that you use to move from that standing position. So these are all drills that are applicable in batting, bowling, and fielding. That at different times in those roles, you're going to be doing some of these movements. Anticipatory posture training, as discussed earlier, and similar to reactive posture training. Just that some of these things, in terms of speed and so on, you would do different modifications because you're targeting speed while using these tools, as you would do with every time you use them in different different aspects of training. Stamina and spirit training. Well, cricket is a sport that is an intermittent sport. It's a sport of short, explosive activities, and you have to do it over and over and over, right? Over a long period. You have the test matches, which are 5 days, 6 hours a day. You have the 50 over games, which is 6 hours, and then the T20 games, which are 3 hours, right? So you wanna be able to have that, your cardio, your aerobic capacity as peak as possible. And I'll explain that in the second why. And some of the tests that are used to test that are the Yo-Yo intermittent test, sprint testing, and the 2K run. Why you want your aerobic system to be at peak aerobic capacity when cricket is a sport that's played in short bursts? Because to recover from those short bursts, the fuel that is used for those short bursts, oxygen is a major ingredient. So if you don't have enough aerobic capacity, you won't have enough of that fuel to replenish. So that's the reason why. And just another thing to say, the energy system between the different parts, they're not working independent of each other. They're interdependent. They're always working together. So we only teach them and explain them separately, but that's not really how they work in real life. These are some of the tools for aerobic training, respiratory muscle awareness mapping. That is being able to use all your respiratory muscles effectively, because respiration is a muscular activity, right? And many people don't use those muscles, all their respiratory muscles, so their respiratory efficiency is very poor. IMT and EMT, what that means, IMT is inhalation muscle training, EMT is exhalation muscle training. So why that concept is important, there is a reflex called the metabolic reflex. That's a reflex that comes on when the respiratory muscles are depleted, and the brain will then need to draw blood from the extremities to help to replenish these respiratory muscles. So hence, that's how you get fatigue of your limbs. But by training your exhalation and inhalation muscles, enhancing the strength would delay the onset of that reflex, which means just simply by training those inhalation, exhalation muscles, you will improve your respiratory capacity, your stamina, etc. And the research has shown, without a doubt, that's why we use it, because one, it's more efficient than a lot of other respiratory training methods with less stress, and you're getting better results. Position-specific training. That is, you're putting the cricketers into positions that they're going to be in when they play, and they have to hold those positions. So you're getting local muscular endurance training there. Air hunger drills. Air hunger drills is where you're going to do movements while holding your breath. That is shown to be a great tool for enhancing aerobic capacity. BET stands for brain endurance training. Brain endurance training is another great tool that's been around in recent years, where we're targeting the endurance of the brain, which also improves endurance of the rest of your body, right? And why this is so good, important, because you're training the athletes. So in the time when that proverbial fourth quarter, or in the key moments of the game when fatigue is set in, that athlete is able to maintain focus despite being in a fatigue state, because they're heightened brain endurance as a result of training it. These some other tools: cardio output method, tempo intervals, aerobic plyometrics, threshold training, cardiac power intervals, tempo-based strength training. These are a bunch of tools that we can use for enhancing aerobic capacity, and there are many others. Anaerobic training, these are some tools here also to enhance anaerobic capacity, alactic intervals, explosive repeat methods, and there are others. This is now where we're talking about spirit, pain control drills. Spirit is really the resilience, the never quit, push through, that what some people call mental toughness. That's what pain control drills help to develop, that skill, right? You do muscular, you want to do things, muscular activities, so you get that burn and ache. One of the great tools are a couple of them right here: isometric long holds and super slow movements. So can you imagine you staying in a batting posture, and I say hold that posture for 3 minutes, right? Then you may want to quit before the 3 minutes because things start to burn, and you have to push through that, develop that resilience and that mental toughness. Also, from a mental perspective, you want to overcome boredom, desire to quit, loss of focus, and you use tools like high repetition, lightly loaded, dynamic joint mobility drills. So you get into positions that you play in cricket and have you do them for high repetition, but lightly loaded. That is gonna enhance you to where you got to stay focused. You're not going to be able to, you can't quit. It's not going to be, boredom is not going to be there, because you're going to be feeling the burn and hurting, and not hurting in terms of pain, but hurting in terms of burn of your muscles and aching. And recovery training, which is really important. These are two tools right here I just mentioned: autogenic drills and progressive muscle relaxation. These are some relaxation drills, along with other recovery drills such as contrast baths, ice baths, cryotherapy, Epsom salts, magnesium salt baths, sleep, having good meal after training, meditation. Those are some mentioned, and there are a bunch more. Suppleness training. What is suppleness? Suppleness is maximally efficient motion performed in demand in any direction at any speed, characterized by smooth transition between movements, right? That's what all field sports, or any sport where you're moving, you want the athlete to be able to do well. And how we could determine where the athlete would need help in those areas is by assessing. And we could use tools such as gait analysis, functional athletic movement drills, and there are other tests that you can use. And then to deal with improving that suppleness in various joints and patterns, movement patterns, we'll use brain-based approaches to improve stretch tolerance, external targeting to improve ranges of motion, isometrics to strengthen and improve stretch tolerance in newfound ranges. So these are the tools that one would use from a applied neurology movement conditioning for the cricket athlete. And what's the beauty about this? This would be individualized to each athlete, whatever they will need to do to enhance their condition. It's not no cookie cutter. So this way you're enhancing that athlete's individual deficits so they can be a better performer. And this is my contact info. If you want to reach me to help you or work with you, or you want me to work with you, you can reach me here. So this is the end. I hope you have gained something from this presentation, and you can ask me questions in the comment section of the video, and I'll be willing to answer them. So until then, have a great day.